welcome to the deep dive. We are jumping straight into understanding Agile project management.
Yeah, and we're using a specific source as our guide today, the Agile sections of a PDF, agile-pmp.pdf by Ahmed Abu Abdo.
Exactly. Our goal here is to really pull out the key insights from this material.
Right, give you quick but, solid understanding of what Agile actually is.
Its core principles, how frameworks like Scrum work.
And why it's so relevant today, especially when you're dealing with change and complexity.
Okay, let's dive in. Agile. You hear the term everywhere.
Yeah.
What's the fundamental idea, according to this source?
Well, the source defines it basically as a time-boxed, iterative approach. It started in software, sure, but it's much broader now.
Time-boxed and iterative, so short cycles.
Exactly. And iterative means you're building things incrementally. You don't wait until the very end to deliver everything.
Right, which is a big difference from, say, traditional waterfall methods mentioned in the source, where it all comes together near the finish line.
A huge difference. You're building incrementally right from the start, breaking the work down.
Into what the source calls user stories.
Often, yeah. Little chunks of functionality. And you work in those short cycles, iterations or sprints, usually 1 to 4 weeks.
And the point is to get something working delivered in each cycle.
Precisely. Getting usable stuff into people's hands early and often. That's the core value proposition.
Okay. And this whole approach, it didn't just appear out of nowhere, right? The source mentions a specific origin point.
Yeah, the Snowbird meeting, February 2001. That's where the Agile Manifesto was created.
Ah, the manifesto. And that really defined the mindset behind Agile.
It did. And the source makes this really important distinction between just, doing Agile, using the tools and practices, and truly being Agile.
Being Agile. So that's more about the underlying philosophy.
Exactly. It's a mindset. It's about how you approach work, especially when things are uncertain, creating and responding to change.
Less about rigid rules, more about values.
Yes. Values like respect, collaboration, focusing on delivering value, always trying to improve. Adaptability is huge.
And sharing information, empowering the team.
Absolutely. So the team members themselves can make decisions quickly without waiting for layers of approval.
That feels like a core difference. Now, this mindset, it's based on the 12 Agile principles listed in the source. We probably can't go through all 12, but maybe highlight a few key ones.
Sure. Well, principle 1 is critical. Our highest priority is to satisfy the customer through early and continuous delivery of valuable software. Or valuable work, really.
Early and continuous. That links right back to the iterative approach.
It does. And then principle 2, maybe the most famous one, welcome changing requirements, even late in development.
That's counterintuitive for traditional project management, isn't it? Change is usually seen as a problem.
Right. But Agile sees change as potentially a competitive advantage for the customer, so you embrace it.
Okay, what else stands out?
Principle 7, deliver working software frequently from a couple of weeks to a couple of months. That's the heartbeat.
The regular delivery cycle.
Yeah. And principle 9 is massive. Working software is the primary measure of progress.
Not documents, not phase gates, but actual working stuff.
Exactly. That's the only real measure. And principle 11 is interesting. Simplicity, the art of maximizing the amount of work not done, is essential.
Focusing only on what truly adds value. Don't over-engineer.
Precisely. And finally, principle 12 talks about reflection and adjustment. The team regularly stops to think about how they can work better.
Continuous improvement, baked right in.
Yeah. These principles, they explain the why behind Agile practices. They all tie back to being responsive and delivering value.
So Agile isn't one single method. The source calls it an umbrella term.
Right. It covers various approaches that follow these principles, and it fits into different project life cycles the source outlines.
Like predictive, iterative, incremental.
Yeah. Predictive is your classic waterfall. Iterative refines things over time. Incremental delivers usable pieces.
And the Agile life cycle itself, the source says, is both iterative and incremental.
That's the key insight. It combines both. You refine things as you deliver working pieces frequently. It's built for high-change environments and follows the manifesto.
Okay. And under this Agile umbrella, we find specific frameworks.
Yes. Like Scrum, which the source details quite a bit, probably the most common one you'll encounter.
Let's get into Scrum then. It has specific roles, artifacts, and events. Let's start with the roles. Who's involved?
3 core roles, product owner, Scrum master, and the development team.
Product owner. That sounds like the business side. Voice of the customer.
Pretty much. They own the product vision, manage and prioritize the product backlog, that list of all the work. They decide what gets built to maximize value.
Oh, okay. And the Scrum Master, the source calls him a servant leader. That sounds different.
It is. It's a really fundamental shift from a traditional project manager. The Scrum Master doesn't direct the team's work.
They don't. What do they do then?
They serve the team and the process. They facilitate the Scrum events, coach everyone on Agile, protect the team from distractions. And this is crucial. They remove impediments, blockers, anything stopping the team from making progress.
So leadership through enabling the team, not commanding them. The source really emphasizes this shift away from central control.
Absolutely. It's about empowering the team. And then you have the development team.
The people actually building the thing.
Right. They are self-organizing, meaning they decide how best to do the work they commit to.
Not the Scrum Master telling them how.
Nope. And they're cross-functional. They have all the skills needed within the team to take a feature from idea to done. They own quality, estimation, delivery.
Okay, clear roles. Now what about the artifacts, the tangible things in Scrum?
The main ones are the product backlog, the sprint backlog, and the increment.
We mentioned the product backlog, the big prioritized list of everything.
Yeah. Owned and ordered by the product owner. It's dynamic, always evolving.
And the sprint backlog, is that just a piece of the product backlog?
Exactly. It's the set of product backlog items the development team selects for a specific sprint. Plus, their plan for how to deliver those items. They pull these in during sprint planning.
Got it. And the third artifact is the increment. What's that?
That's the actual usable product that comes out of a sprint. It's the sum of all the backlog items completed during that sprint, plus the value of all the previous increments.
And the key is that it has to be done.
Absolutely done, meaning fully integrated, tested, meets the quality standards, and is potentially shippable, usable. That's your measure of progress.
That usable increment embodies that frequent delivery principle. Okay, roles, artifacts. What about the events, the ceremonies?
Right. Scrum runs in sprints, and each sprint contains these events. It kicks off with sprint planning.
Where they decide what to do in the upcoming sprint.
Yes. The whole Scrum team collaborates. They define a sprint goal, select items from the product backlog to achieve that goal, and figure out how they'll get the work done.
Then comes the famous one, the daily stand-up, or daily Scrum.
Yep, the daily Scrum. A quick 15-minute, time-boxed meeting just for the development team.
15 minutes, that's it. What do they cover?
It's a synchronization point. Usually, what did I do yesterday? What will I do today? And are there any impediments? It's not for problem solving on the spot.
Is raising awareness of blockers.
Exactly. So the Scrum Master can then help remove them outside the meeting.
Okay. And at the end of the sprint?
Two main events. First, the sprint review.
Is that where they show off the work?
Essentially, yes. The Scrum team demonstrates the increment they built to stakeholders. You get feedback. It's an informal meeting, not a status report. And the source mentions, in Q5 of its Q&A, the importance of inviting the right stakeholders here.
So you inspect the product and adapt the backlog based on feedback.
Correct. And if something wasn't truly done, it doesn't get demonstrated, and it goes back to the product backlog.
And after the review?
Then you have the sprint retrospective. This is crucial for improvement.
This is just for the Scrum team. Product owner, Scrum Master, development team.
Yes. It's their chance to inspect how the last sprint went regarding people, processes, tools, what worked well, what didn't.
And they identify improvements to try in the next sprint.
Exactly. This is where you might address issues like, say, why a deliverable was misunderstood, as mentioned in Q6 of the Q&A. Find the root cause and adapt.
And you can't just extend the sprint if things aren't done, right? Q7 touched on that.
Nope. Sprints are fixed time boxes. That rhythm is important. You finish the sprint, have the review in retro, and start the next one.
Okay, that gives a good overview of the Scrum framework. But the source also mentions other general Agile concepts and tools.
Yeah, things used across different Agile approaches, including Scrum, like user stories.
We touched on those, the format. As a user, I want feature, so that benefit.
Right, keeps the focus squarely on user value.
How do teams estimate these stories? It's not typically in hours, is it?
Often not. They use relative estimation, like story points. It's a unit reflecting effort, complexity, uncertainty, risk, all rolled into one relative number.
How do they decide on the points?
Techniques like planning poker are common, where the team discusses and votes to reach consensus. Sometimes, for unclear stories, they might do a spike.
A spike.
Yeah, a short time-box task purely for investigation or research, just enough to clarify the story so it can be estimated later.
Okay. And once they complete stories, how do they track their pace?
That's velocity. It's simply the total story points of all the done user stories completed in a single sprint.
And that helps with future planning.
Exactly. By looking at the average velocity over the last few sprints, the team gets a sense of their capacity for upcoming sprints. Helps make commitments more realistic.
Makes sense? What about keeping that main product backlog tidy?
That's backlog refinement, or sometimes called backlog grooming. It's an ongoing activity.
Not just a single meeting.
No, it happens throughout the sprint. The product owner and development team collaborate to review items, add details, estimate them, split big ones, reprioritize, keeps the backlog ready for the next sprint planning.
And how do teams communicate progress without drowning in status reports? You mentioned transparency.
Information radiators. Big, visible charts or boards.
Like what?
Burn-up charts showing work completed versus total scope. Burn-down charts showing work remaining versus time. Kanban boards visualizing the workflow. Impediment logs tracking blockers.
So anyone can just walk by and see the status.
Pretty much. The source's Q&A, like Q10 and Q11, suggests these are often better for updating executives or stakeholders than formal reports. You make the information visible and accessible.
And you mentioned Kanban boards Q8, and the source suggested using things like WIP limits from Kanban.
Yeah, work in progress limits. Limiting how many tasks can be in progress at once. It helps the team focus, prevents overload, and makes bottlenecks really obvious, often used to tackle issues like persistent overtime.
This all seemed to loop back to that idea of the Scrum Master as a servant leader, enabling the team. The source really hammers this point.
It's central to Agile's philosophy, leading by serving the team's needs so they can perform at their best.
What does that look like day to day, according to the source?
Supporting them, facilitating teamwork, removing those impediments we talked about, educating people on Agile values, enabling interaction, shielding the team from interruptions.
Protecting their focus.
Exactly. Celebrating successes, communicating the vision. And yeah, the source even amusingly mentions carry food and water, just doing whatever it takes to help the team succeed.
Let's make this more concrete with some scenarios from the source's Q&A section. These show Agile principles in action, like what happens if there's conflict within the team? Q2 addresses this.
Right. The source suggests the self-organizing development team should try to resolve it first. The Scrum Master facilitates that discussion, but doesn't just step in and dictate a solution. It's not typically the PO's job either.
Okay. And Q17. What if, in sprint planning, the team realizes they've picked way too much work for the sprint?
You don't just accept it and plan for overtime. The team has to collaborate with the product owner to reduce the scope for that sprint. They commit to a realistic amount they believe they can get done.
What about urgent, unexpected work mid-sprint? Like Q16's example of a new regulation.
You generally protect the sprint goal and the time box. The source says the right move is usually to add it to the product backlog, discuss its priority with the product owner, and consider it for the next sprint's planning, not just throw it into the current sprint. And if there's a misunderstanding about what was delivered maybe after the sprint review, like Q6...
The retrospective is key there, right?
Exactly. Use the retrospective to understand why the misunderstanding happened. Was the user story unclear? Were acceptance criteria missing? Find the root cause and improve the process.
The source also flags challenges, like in Q12, where iterative rework needing to refine things might be seen negatively by people used to linear projects.
Yeah, that's a common hurdle. Education about the Agile mindset is important there. And Q13 highlights how vital transparency is for client satisfaction. Seeing progress regularly prevents big mismatches in vision later on.
Okay, after a sprint review where maybe new ideas came up, what's the very next step? Q14 touches on this.
You'd immediately update the product backlog based on the feedback received. Then start refining and estimating any new items discussed, getting them ready for future consideration.
What if you need to get consensus on a big topic across many stakeholders? Q15.
The source suggests something collaborative, like a stakeholder brainstorming session. Fits the Agile principle of collaboration over rigid processes.
And lastly, scaling Agile for really large projects with multiple teams. Q9.
Yeah, the source mentions using frameworks designed for that, like Scrum of Scrums, to coordinate between the different teams working on the same product.
Okay, so we've journeyed through quite a bit based on this source, from the core definition and mindset of Agile.
Through the specifics of Scrum roles, artifacts, events.
Looked at tools like user stories, story points, velocity, information radiators.
Reinforced that crucial concept of servant leadership.
And explored how it all plays out in practical situations using those Q&A insights.
It really paints a picture of Agile as being fundamentally about a adaptability, collaboration, and delivering actual value incrementally and frequently.
For you listening, these concepts offer a different lens, a different toolkit for managing work, especially when things are constantly changing.
Definitely. And it leaves us with an interesting thought, prompted by the source's emphasis on the shifts involved. The challenges of adoption, the changing role of managers towards servant leadership.
Right.
So, given all that, how can organizations best set up the environment for these agile teams to truly succeed? And maybe more profoundly, when the source highlights the focus on people and collaboration driving value.
Hmm.
What does success really look like in an agile world? Is it just features delivered or something more?
That's a great question to ponder. Definitely food for thought on the human side of these frameworks.